In the shadowed corridors of the Medici Palace, young Lorenzo walked with measured steps, his mind turning over the conversation he had just witnessed. The Duke of Milan's ambassador had left in defeat, his proposed alliance crumbling like ancient parchment. What had struck Lorenzo most profoundly was not the Duke's failure, but the methodical way his master had dismantled every argument, every threat, every promise. There had been no anger, no desperation, only the cold precision of a man who understood power's true nature. Power, his mentor had said later, as they stood overlooking the Arno River, is not taken. It is not given. It is forged in the crucible of one's own will, tempered by the destruction of everything weak within oneself. These words would echo through centuries, finding their way into the writings of Niccolò Machiavelli, who understood that true strength begins with the annihilation of one's own vulnerabilities. The first rule of unbreakable power demands the most ruthless honesty: know thyself completely, then destroy what is weak. Most men live their entire lives as prisoners of their own illusions, believing themselves to be what they wish to be rather than confronting what they actually are. They see courage where there is merely foolhardiness, wisdom where there is only cunning, and strength where there exists nothing but the brittle facade of wounded pride. The man who seeks true power must first become an archaeologist of his own soul, excavating every hidden fear, every secret shame, every trembling doubt that could be weaponized against him. Consider how Marcus Aurelius, despite his position as the most powerful man in the known world, spent his private hours cataloging his own weaknesses in what would become the Meditations. He wrote not for posterity, but for the surgical precision required to cut away his own human frailties. You have power over your mind, not outside events, he reminded himself, understanding that external power without internal mastery is merely elaborate slavery. The second rule follows inevitably from the first: never reveal your true self to anyone. Once you have identified and begun systematically destroying your weaknesses, you must ensure that others never gain access to your authentic thoughts, feelings, or intentions. This is not mere paranoia, it is strategic invisibility. The moment others can predict your reactions, they own you. The moment they know what truly wounds you, they possess the weapon of your destruction. History remembers Cardinal Richelieu not for his piety, but for his impenetrable mask. Even his closest advisors never knew whether his smiles indicated pleasure or the prelude to their destruction. He understood that authentic emotion is a luxury only the powerless can afford. Those who seek to command must become actors so skilled that they forget where the performance ends and reality begins. In the merchant republics of Renaissance Italy, successful traders learned this lesson through necessity. They would negotiate with men who had murdered their brothers, dine with those who had bankrupted their families, and smile warmly at those who plotted their ruin. Their faces became perfect mirrors, reflecting back whatever expression would best serve their interests. Their true selves became so deeply buried that even they sometimes forgot where to find them. The third rule cuts deeper still: trust no one completely, but make others trust you absolutely. Trust is the currency of the weak, the tool by which the naive surrender their agency to others. Yet it is also the most powerful weapon in the arsenal of those who understand its true nature. A man who trusts is a man who has placed his fate in another's hands. A man who inspires trust while maintaining perfect emotional independence is a man who controls destinies. The Duke of Bordeaux exemplified this principle with terrifying effectiveness. He surrounded himself with advisors who would have died for him, generals who believed in his cause with religious fervor, and citizens who saw him as their protector and salvation. Yet not one of them truly knew him. Not one could predict his actions when their interests diverged from his own. He had made himself indispensable to them while ensuring they remained utterly dispensable to him. This requires the cultivation of what might be called strategic empathy, the ability to understand others so completely that you can predict their every reaction while remaining utterly unmoved by their suffering or joy. You learn to speak the language of their deepest needs and most cherished fears. You become the solution to problems they didn't even know they had. But, beneath this perfect performance of understanding, your own heart remains locked away, untouchable and uncommitted. The fourth rule demands perhaps the greatest sacrifice: love nothing that can be taken from you. Every attachment becomes a chain that others can pull. Every person you truly care about becomes a hostage in the hands of your enemies. Every possession you cherish becomes a weapon pointed at your heart. The unbreakable man learns to hold everything lightly, to love conditionally, to care strategically. This does not mean becoming a psychopath incapable of human connection. Rather, it means restructuring the very nature of how you relate to the world. You may care deeply for your family, but you must be prepared to sacrifice them if the alternative is the destruction of your larger purpose. You may love your homeland, but you must be willing to see it burn if its preservation requires your own annihilation. Alexander the Great understood this when he ordered the execution of his closest friend Philotas on suspicion of treason. The pain was genuine. Ancient sources speak of his tears, but the decision was instant and irreversible. He had made himself psychologically capable of choosing power over love, duty over sentiment, the future over the present. The fifth rule flows from this emotional discipline: make your enemies destroy themselves. Direct confrontation is the strategy of the weak, the last resort of those who lack the intelligence to achieve victory through manipulation. The truly powerful never dirty their hands with the blood of their enemies. Instead, they create conditions where their enemies' own weaknesses become the instruments of their destruction. Consider how Catherine de' Medici dealt with the Protestant uprising in France. Rather than deploying armies immediately, she first exacerbated the divisions within the Protestant movement, feeding their natural suspicions of one another, providing just enough resources to keep their conflicts alive but never enough to achieve decisive victory. She then sat back and watched as they tore themselves apart, emerging from the chaos as the only viable source of stability and order. This requires deep patience and deeper understanding of human psychology. You must become a student of weakness in all its forms: pride that can be goaded into overreach, greed that can be tempted into self-destructive choices, fear that can be amplified until it becomes paralysis, love that can be twisted into betrayal. You learn to plant seeds of doubt so subtle that your enemies believe their suspicions are their own insights. You become a master of the slow poison, the carefully placed rumor, the strategically revealed secret that destroys trust between allies. The sixth rule requires the abandonment of conventional morality: use any means necessary to achieve your ends, but never let the means corrupt your judgment. The weak cling to moral absolutes because they provide the comfort of certainty in an uncertain world. The powerful understand that morality is a tool like any other, useful when it serves your purposes, discarded when it becomes an obstacle. This is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of Machiavellian thinking. It is not about becoming evil, it is about achieving complete flexibility in your methods while maintaining absolute clarity about your objectives. You may need to lie, steal, betray, or even kill, but these actions must never become ends in themselves. They are surgical instruments, to be used with precision and put away when the operation is complete. Talleyrand mastered this principle during the chaos of the French Revolution and its aftermath. He served the monarchy, then the Republic, then Napoleon, then the Restoration, each time with apparent loyalty and genuine effectiveness. His critics called him a turncoat, but they missed the deeper truth: he had identified the preservation of France as his ultimate loyalty, and everything else, including his own reputation for consistency, became subordinate to that goal. The seventh rule demands the cultivation of strategic paranoia: assume everyone is plotting against you, and you will never be surprised. This is not the paranoia of the mentally ill, which sees threats that do not exist. This is the paranoia of the strategically intelligent, which recognizes that in any system where power is at stake, everyone is indeed plotting, consciously or unconsciously, to improve their position at the expense of others. The wise ruler operates from the assumption that every smile conceals calculation, every gesture of friendship masks self-interest, every offer of alliance contains the seeds of future betrayal. This does not make him cynical, it makes him realistic. And, paradoxically, this assumption of universal treachery allows him to appreciate genuine loyalty when it appears while never being devastated when it proves false. Frederick the Great institutionalized this principle in his court, creating overlapping networks of spies and informants that watched not only his enemies but each other. No single person ever possessed enough information to threaten him, and no conspiracy could form without his knowledge. He turned the natural human tendency toward intrigue into an early warning system for threats against his rule. Part 2: The weaponization of human nature. The eighth rule recognizes that human beings are fundamentally predictable machines, driven by biological imperatives and psychological patterns that have remained unchanged since the dawn of civilization. Master the art of reading people instantly and completely. Every person carries their entire psychological profile in their posture, their word choices, their unconscious gestures, and their instinctive reactions. Learning to decode these signals transforms you from someone who reacts to human behavior into someone who predicts and controls it. Watch how a man enters a room. Does he scan for threats or opportunities? Does he position himself near exits or centers of attention? Notice how he speaks about others in their absence. This reveals not their character but his own capacity for loyalty. Observe what makes him angry, what makes him laugh, what makes him afraid. These reactions are windows into his soul, and souls, once understood, can be manipulated with mathematical precision. Cardinal Mazarin, who effectively ruled France during Louis XIV minority, possessed this ability to such a degree that ambassadors felt as though he could see through their skulls into their thoughts. He would conduct negotiations by saying almost nothing, instead watching facial micro-expressions, noting which topics caused tension in his opponent's shoulders, observing which arguments made them unconsciously lean forward or pull back. By the time they spoke, he already knew their positions, their limits, and their breaking points. This skill requires training yourself to notice what others ignore. Most people are so consumed with managing their own image that they pay little attention to the constant stream of information others broadcast unconsciously. You must become a collector of these signals, a student of the thousand small tells that reveal character, intention, and weakness. Practice reading strangers in public spaces, predicting their actions, testing your hypotheses. Over time, you develop an almost supernatural ability to understand and anticipate human behavior. The ninth rule leverages this understanding: give people what they want in order to take what you need. Every human being is driven by a core set of desires: recognition, security, power, love, meaning. These drives operate beneath conscious awareness, shaping decisions that people believe they make rationally. Once you identify what someone truly wants, you can position yourself as the only viable source of that fulfillment. But here lies the crucial distinction that separates masters from manipulators: you must actually deliver what you promise, at least partially and temporarily. Empty promises create enemies, fulfilled promises create dependencies. The goal is not to cheat people but to create a system where their happiness requires your continued success and power. Consider how Franklin D. Roosevelt built his political dominance during the Great Depression. He identified that what Americans wanted most was not prosperity, which was obviously beyond any politician's immediate power to deliver, but the feeling that someone understood their suffering and was fighting for them. He provided this feeling through his radio addresses, his public works programs, and his visible anger at the forces that had caused their pain. People felt heard and represented, and, in return, they gave him unprecedented power to reshape American society. The 10th rule requires the most sophisticated understanding of social dynamics: control information flow absolutely. In any organization, at any level of society, power flows along the same channels as information. Those who know what others do not know, who can decide what information reaches whom and when, control the very basis of decision-making. They shape reality itself for everyone around them. This goes far beyond simple secrecy. It involves becoming the central nervous system of your organization, the point through which all significant communication must pass. You position yourself so that important information naturally flows to you first. You develop sources throughout every level of the hierarchy. You create systems that make bypassing you more difficult than going through you. J. Edgar Hoover understood this principle perhaps better than any figure in American history. As director of the FBI, he made himself the repository of secrets about virtually every important figure in American politics. He knew about affairs, financial improprieties, family scandals, and private weaknesses of presidents, senators, judges, and business leaders. This information was rarely used for blackmail in any crude sense. Instead, its mere existence, and people's knowledge that he possessed it, was sufficient to ensure their cooperation and his job security across multiple decades and political administrations. The 11th rule demands the careful management of your public image: appear stronger than you are, but never pretend to be what you cannot become. The perception of power often matters more than its reality, but false strength is eventually exposed, usually at the worst possible moment. The key is to project an image that represents the maximum possible interpretation of your actual capabilities while ensuring you can deliver on the expectations you create.
This requires deep self-knowledge combined with strategic presentation.
If you are intelligent but not brilliant, you position yourself as thoughtful and analytical rather than claiming genius. If you are determined but not naturally charismatic, you build a reputation for reliability and competence rather than inspiration. The goal is to become known for qualities you actually possess, amplified to their maximum credible extent. Augustus Caesar mastered this balance by carefully crafting an image of modest competence while systematically accumulating unprecedented power. He never claimed to be a military genius like his adoptive father, but he consistently chose excellent generals and took credit for their victories. He never pretended to divine wisdom, but he made decisions with such careful preparation that they appeared effortlessly correct. He created a mythology of humble service while building the most absolute monarchy the world had ever seen. The 12th and final rule encompasses all the others: never stop growing in power, because stagnation is the beginning of decay. Power, unlike wealth or knowledge, cannot be safely stored or preserved. It must be constantly exercised, expanded, and renewed, or it begins to atrophy. The moment you stop actively increasing your influence is the moment your enemies begin to sense weakness and start planning your downfall. This does not mean reckless expansion or pointless conflict. It means continuously identifying new sources of leverage, new alliances to build, new skills to master, new weaknesses in your position to eliminate. It means treating power like a living organism that requires constant feeding and exercise to remain healthy. Part 3, The Unbreakable Self. The man who emerges from the systematic application of these 12 rules bears little resemblance to the person who first encountered them. He has become something beyond ordinary human weakness, beyond the petty emotions and random impulses that govern most lives. He has achieved what the ancient Stoics called ataraxia, perfect emotional equilibrium, not through philosophical meditation but through the practical elimination of every psychological vulnerability that could be exploited by others. Standing in his private chambers as dawn breaks over his domain, this transformed individual surveys not just the physical territory under his control but the vast network of human relationships he has carefully constructed to serve his will. Every person in his organization knows exactly what is expected of them and exactly what they can expect in return. Every potential rival has been either eliminated, co-opted, or positioned where they pose no threat. Every source of information that matters flows ultimately to him. Yet the greatest achievement is not what he controls externally but what he has destroyed within himself. The weak self, the part that needed approval, that feared abandonment, that craved love more than respect, has been systematically eliminated. What remains is pure will married to perfect intelligence, capable of any action that serves his larger purpose while being moved by no emotion that could compromise his judgment. This transformation comes at a cost that most people are unwilling to pay. The man who destroys his weak self loses the capacity for unconditional love, for complete trust, for innocent pleasure. He becomes isolated in a way that ordinary people cannot imagine, surrounded by others but fundamentally alone, understood by none because he reveals his true nature to no one. But this isolation is not the loneliness of the outcast, it is the solitude of the mountain peak. From his position of absolute emotional independence, he can survey the entire landscape of human interaction with perfect clarity. He sees how others bind themselves with chains of sentiment and obligation. He watches as they surrender their agency to temporary emotions and permanent attachments. He observes their suffering, their confusion, their desperate search for meaning in relationships that inevitably disappoint them. And, perhaps, in his most private moments, he remembers what it felt like to be one of them. Perhaps he recalls the warmth of unguarded affection, the comfort of absolute trust, the joy of spontaneous emotion. These memories serve not as sources of regret but as reminders of why his transformation was necessary. The weak self would have been destroyed by the very forces he now commands. The man who needed others' love would have been enslaved by that need. The person who trusted unconditionally would have been betrayed at the moment of greatest vulnerability. The practical benefits of this transformation extend far beyond personal invulnerability. The man who cannot be emotionally manipulated becomes a stable center around which others can organize their lives. His employees know that his decisions are based on logic rather than mood, principle rather than preference. His allies trust him not because they understand his heart but because they can predict his actions. His enemies may hate him, but they cannot confuse him, frighten him, or turn him against his own interests. In the broader sphere of human affairs, such individuals become the architects of history. They create the institutions that outlast their own lives, establish the principles that guide future generations, and make the hard decisions that others lack the courage to face. They transform abstract possibilities into concrete realities through the simple expedient of refusing to be deterred by obstacles that would stop ordinary men. Consider the legacy of individuals who successfully implemented these principles throughout history. They built empires, founded religions, created works of art that have endured for millennia, and established philosophical frameworks that continue to shape human thought. They did not achieve these things despite their emotional detachment but because of it. Their refusal to be enslaved by their own weakness freed them to serve larger purposes that transcended personal gratification. The ultimate paradox of the Machiavellian path is that the man who appears most ruthlessly selfish often achieves the most lasting contributions to human civilization. By refusing to be limited by conventional morality, he gains the freedom to create new moral frameworks. By destroying his weak self, he builds something stronger that can bear greater weights and withstand larger storms. This is not to suggest that everyone should or could follow this path. Most people lack the intellectual capacity, emotional discipline, or strategic vision required for such a transformation. They are better served by the conventional virtues of loyalty, honesty, and emotional authenticity that help them build satisfying personal relationships and contribute to stable communities. The world needs followers as well as leaders, supporters as well as architects. But, for those few individuals who possess both the capability and the calling to shape large-scale human affairs, these principles offer a roadmap to effectiveness that no amount of good intentions can match. They provide a method for transcending the limitations that keep most people trapped in cycles of reactive behavior and emotional turbulence. The man who has truly internalized these rules finds himself in a unique position among human beings. He alone is free, not free to do whatever he wants, for he is bound by the logic of his larger purposes, but free from the emotional compulsions that govern others. He alone sees clearly, not because he is more intelligent than others, but because his vision is not distorted by wishful thinking or emotional interference. He alone can act, not because he has more courage, but because he has eliminated the internal conflicts that paralyze others at crucial moments. In the end, the 12 rules of Machiavellian power are not really about dominating others. They are about achieving perfect self-mastery in a world where self-mastery is the rarest and most valuable of all human accomplishments. The man who destroys his weak self cannot be destroyed by others because he has already done to himself everything they might attempt to do to him. He has faced his own worst possibilities and emerged stronger. He has acknowledged his deepest fears and moved beyond them. He has recognized his greatest weaknesses and systematically eliminated them. What remains is something that transcends ordinary humanity while remaining recognizably human. It is power in its purest form, not the crude ability to force others to obey, but the refined capacity to shape reality according to a conscious will. It is strength that cannot be broken because it contains no points of weakness. It is wisdom that cannot be confused because it rests on complete self-knowledge. The path outlined in these rules is not for everyone, and perhaps it is not for anyone who values the simple pleasures of ordinary human connection above the complex satisfactions of historical achievement. But, for those who choose to walk it, it offers something that no other philosophy can provide, the promise of becoming truly unbreakable in a world that breaks almost everyone eventually. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the transformed man stands alone with his thoughts, he may sometimes wonder what he has become and whether the price was worth paying. But these doubts, if they come at all, pass quickly. He has traded the temporary comforts of emotional vulnerability for the permanent satisfaction of unassailable strength. He has given up the right to be a victim in exchange for the power to determine his own destiny and influence the destinies of others. And, perhaps most importantly, he has achieved something that most people never even imagine: complete congruence between his deepest nature and his public role. He is exactly what he appears to be, not because he has revealed everything, but because he has eliminated everything that contradicted his chosen identity. He has become a work of art, a perfectly crafted instrument of his own will, a human being who has transcended the random accidents of emotion and circumstance that define ordinary existence. This is the ultimate achievement of Machiavellian transformation, not just the ability to control others, but the capacity to create oneself according to a conscious design. The weak self that once existed was not murdered but transcended, incorporated into something larger and more powerful. What emerges is not a monster but a master of himself first, and only consequently of the world around him. The man who cannot be broken has learned the deepest secret of power. It comes not from external sources but from internal transformation. It cannot be given or taken away because it is not dependent on circumstances beyond one's control. It grows stronger under pressure because it has been forged in the fire of deliberate self-destruction and conscious reconstruction. Standing at the pinnacle of his achievement, such a man surveys a world full of people who remain slaves to their own emotions, prisoners of their own weaknesses, victims of their own illusions. He feels neither contempt nor pity for them. Such emotions would be weaknesses he has long since eliminated. Instead, he feels the calm satisfaction of someone who has solved the fundamental problem of human existence: how to maintain perfect freedom in a world of infinite constraints. He has become unbreakable not through avoiding challenges but by ensuring that he always possesses greater strength than any force that might be brought against him. He has achieved security not through building walls but by eliminating anything within himself that could be threatened. He has found peace not through avoiding conflict but by becoming someone for whom victory is inevitable because defeat is psychologically impossible. This is the promise and the threat of the Machiavellian path. It works. It delivers exactly what it promises to those who have the courage to pay its price. It creates individuals who are genuinely superior to their environment rather than merely adapted to it. It transforms ordinary people into historical forces, personal problems into political solutions, individual will into collective destiny. The man who emerges from this transformation carries within himself the power to reshape the world, not because he possesses supernatural abilities, but because he has eliminated the internal obstacles that prevent most people from exercising the abilities they already possess. He has become what every human being has the potential to become: the conscious architect of his own existence and the deliberate creator of his own legacy. In destroying what was weak within himself, he has revealed what was always strong. In abandoning what was temporary, he has discovered what is permanent. In sacrificing what was merely personal, he has gained access to what is truly universal. He has become unbreakable because he has learned the ultimate secret: the only thing that can destroy a man is his own acceptance of destruction. Everything else is just circumstance, and circumstances can always be changed by those who refuse to be limited by them. Thus concludes the examination of power's deepest truths, revealed not through abstract philosophy but through the practical wisdom of those who shape the world according to their will. The path remains open to any who possess the courage to walk it, the intelligence to understand it, and the discipline to complete it. The choice, as always, belongs entirely to the individual who stands at the crossroads between weakness and strength, between victimhood and mastery, between being shaped by the world and shaping the world in return.